Welcome back to the Snowpoint Cast. This week we're going to be going over a deck from RS to PK called Fossils. So this deck is actually probably one of the most whack deck lists that I have gone over yet on the channel. It only plays one basic Pokemon. So it's from this dude on Twitter. I don't remember his exact name. It's something like Conten Magic Hand. He's a Japanese player who's done a lot for the RS to PK format. He did a lot in terms of the Magma deck list that I just went over. I think it was like something like 2 weeks ago. But yeah, this is his list and we're going to go over it. So let's get right into it. Starting off with one Jirachi. This is your only basic Pokemon in the deck, which seems really wacky. I think I've never played a deck with only one basic Pokemon before. But all things considered, it makes kind of sense. So Jirachi, it's got 60 HP. It's a metal type, single retreat, 30 resistance to grass, and a weakness to fire. So Wishing Star is the power. It's the reason you play it. So once you're in your turn before you attack, if Jirachi is your active Pokemon, you may look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose one of them, and put them into your hand, and then shuffle the rest back. So this is great because this is a combo deck. You really need to find the pieces that you need to set up with this deck, and if you whiff that combo, this deck is absolutely garbo. So Wishing Star is a big part of helping you get there, and we'll get into those combo pieces when they come up. It's mostly a stadium that you're going to be looking for, or a card that'll search you for a stadium. So most of the time you're going to be Wishing Starring for either a Scott or a Strange Cave in this deck. But yeah, so Metallic Blow, you can actually, you actually can use this. So for a metal and a colorless, it does 20. If the defending Pokemon has any Poke Bodies, this attack does 30 more damage. Kind of good in a niche situation. Kind of the only dicey thing about starting Jirachi is if your opponent starts Girafarig, it makes your setup a lot harder unless you have the cards in your hand already. But we'll get to that when we come to it. So only Jirachi. You might be getting some mulligans before you find this Jirachi because it's the only basic in your deck. I don't know what the odds are of starting with your Jirachi when you only play one, but it's probably not that high. Okay, so getting into Kabuto, get into the Kabutops line. This is one of 2 Kabuto you play. This is the water type Kabuto, and we play it for the attack. It's really good. So 60 HP, water, 2 retreat, which is not amazing. Weakness to grass. The Poke Body is really good though. So exoskeleton, any damage done to Kabuto by attacks is reduced by 20. So this gives it protection from Arcanine EX on the bench. So that's actually really clutch in this format. Having exoskeleton just means that Arcanine's not sniping you for 20 and chipping so that they can one-shot you later. So that's really, really good actually. And honestly, really good against Bombtar as well. Bombtar spreads 20s. So, you know, if they get a really fast board on you and they start spreading on you, it's doing nothing to your Kabuto. So exoskeleton, really, really solid Poke Body. But the real reason that you play this is for Team Assembly. So Team Assembly is the first attack for one colorless. Search your deck for an Omanyte, Kabuto, or any basic Pokemon, and and put as many of them as you like onto your bench. So that's actually kind of clutch. You just get to like load your bench up with as much Kabutos or Omanytes as you want. You just get to set up your board in a single attack. Really, really clutch. I didn't know it was basic Pokemon. Not that that really matters because you don't play any basics outside of Jirachi, which you have to start. But yeah, you just get a Team Assembly, and then all of a sudden you have a full bench, a full board for one single colorless, which is really, really, really solid. And then the other attack, Pierce. So for fighting a colorless, it does 20. Not amazing, but not awful. The other Kabuto, so this one's a fighting type. It's got 2 retreat and a weakness to grass. The Poke Body is the reason that you play this one. So Ancient Protection. Each of your Omanyte, Omastar, Kabuto, Kabutops, and Kabutops EX have no weakness. So if this guy's in play, it just means all of your main attackers don't have a weakness, which is also really clutch. It really depends on the matchup that you're playing against, but it can be really important to have that no weakness depending on what you're going up against. Granite Head is the attack on this Kabuto. So for 2 colors, it does 20. During your opponent's next turn, any damage done to Kabuto by attacks is reduced by 10. Again, not amazing, but not awful. But the reason that you play those is for the Kabutops. So this is one of 2 Kabutops you play. You play a lot of splits in this deck. I really do like that about that list. This list, it just means you get to attack for 4 different damage types, and a lot of them are actually really relevant in this format. So this is one of them, Kabutops. It covers your fighting type. So 110 HP, which is pretty beefy. Got fighting type, 2 retreat, a weakness to grass, maintains that weakness. Ancient Shell is the Poke Body on this Pokemon. So it keeps the Exoskeleton on Kabuto. It's really good. As long as you have Omanyte or Omastar in play, damage done to Kabutops is reduced by 20. So this is really good just because you play a card called Briney, Briney's Compassion. So it just means that these Kabutops can be really difficult to knock out. And then when they do get you down to almost knocked out, you can just Briney and then take it all back and then just put it all back down with Strange Cave. So really, really solid power. Sometimes you turn that off because you do play Cessation Crystal in this deck. So you kind of got to figure out what's more valuable in the matchup. Is it more valuable to turn your opponent's Poke Powers and Poke Bodies off? In some matchups, like against LBS, you can't let them have that Blastoise EX. But in other matchups, it's really clutch to have that Ancient Shell. Like I said, against Bombtar, that could be one of those things where, you know, Bombtar doesn't have a ton of really good options if you only have like Kabutops in play and an Omastar, and the only thing they're hitting with Spinning Tail is an Omastar for 10. That's really hard, and they're also getting hit for weakness. You two-shot a Bombtar. So this could be a Bombtar potential counter. Probably not, because Bombtar is really OP. But Ancient Shell, really cool Pokebody that is really good in some situations for sure if you don't have a Cessation Crystal out. So Energy Stream, the first attack, really solid attack. So for one fighting, you do 30. And then you can search your discard pile for an energy card and attach it to Kabutops. So that's great because it's not, or for a basic energy card. Yeah, so you can only search for basics. You only play 5 basics, but you play some ways to search them as well as some ways to discard them as well. So that's great to recover. You know, if you got a basic energy into Kabutops and it does end up dying, you can energy stream, and then it sets you up for extra claws the next turn because you go extra stream, you got 1 on, and then you can just attach and attack with extra claws. So extra claws, another solid attack for sure. So 1 fighting, 2 colors, it does 50. If the defending Pokemon is a Pokemon EX, this attack does 50 plus 30 more damage. So you're hitting him for 80 damage instead, which is a significant buff. You're two-shotting every EX in the format at that point. But yeah, just a pretty beefy attack, and especially with that acceleration through Energy Stream, it's not that hard to get up. You also play Double Rainbow and Scramble, so sometimes extra claws could just be a single attach. Okay, so you also play the Delta Species Lightning type Kabutops. So this is mainly just a hit for lightning weakness. Pidgeot can be a bit of an issue because you can't really handle being clutched, especially if it's against like an Evolutions deck and you're getting clutched with special conditions. It can be really bad, but Kabutops is your answer to Pidgeot, especially because, you know, Kabutops is your early game attacker. You want to attack with it first, and then you attack with the Omastar a little bit later. But because of Pidgeot's resistance to fighting, that could make your early game really, really tough. You can just hit the Pidgeot for almost nothing at that point. But that's why you play the Kabutops. So Kabutops Delta Species is a lightning type. It's got 100 HP, single retreat, so it's better than the 2 retreat on the other one. Weakness to grass. The first attack is called Vital Drain. So it's actually kind of cool. For a lightning calls, it does 30, which is not that great, but it says if the defending Pokemon is knocked out by this attack, remove all special conditions and 7 damage counters from Kabutops. So I mean, getting that heal off is really good. The special conditions as well, depending on what matchup you're playing against. Vital Drain, the second effect of that, if you're able to knock something out with a Vital Drain, it can turn the board position from, I got a Kabutops with damage and 1 else on the bench, but, you know, my opponent's got like 3 attackers, and then all of a sudden you Vital Drain, and then they have 2 attackers and you're tied, and now all of a sudden you're back to full health, and you're facing down an even board instead of a bit of a skewed one. So that attack's kind of cool in some situations. And then Thunderous Blow. So for 3 colors, it does 40 plus 10 damage for each lightning energy attached to Kabutops. So like I said, you play Double Rainbow Energy and Scramble. So this can be a single attach through a Scramble, and then you can just swing for 70 times 2 is 140. So you hit a lot of stuff for big weakness. Most of the stage 2s that are weak to lightning, you're just able to one-shot with that attack if you get a Scramble or a Double Rainbow. But yeah, you also play the Holon's Electrode and the Holon's Magneton, so you can fulfill those lightning energy costs even though you don't technically play any lightning energy in the deck. But yeah, really cool lightning attacker. Also such a cool art on that card. Okay, so getting to the Omastar line. So you're playing 3 Omanyte. Omanyte's got 70 HP, which is a little bit higher than that Kabuto. Single retreat and a weakness to lightning. So having a different type of weakness on this line is kind of cool because you don't really like to get shut off entirely by a deck. You know, if you're going up against a lightning type deck, having a grass weak Kabutops is really cool, and vice versa. If you're going up against a grass deck, to have a lightning weak Omastar is also very beneficial. So single retreat, weakness to lightning, and then Team Assembly keeps that Team Assembly. It's got another one with Team Assembly, so Team Assembly is really good. I'll just read it again. Search your deck for Omanyte, Kabuto, or any basic Pokemon and put as many of them as you like onto your bench. You just get to load your board as soon as you get a Team Assembly. And that's the main reason you play this. You know, it would make sense if you're playing 4, but because of the Kabuto's Ancient Protection, it is a really good Pokebody. So I think it's worth a 1 of to play that split because no weakness is really hot. And Bind. So before we talk about the other Omanyte, bind for 2 colors, 20. Flip a coin if heads the defending Pokemon is now paralyzed. Paralyzed attack's actually kind of good. Those are the best attacks to have on a Pokemon that's not attacking, because not your like main attacker rather, or a pre-evolution, because you know if you're attacking with one of your prevos, usually you're not in a spot where you're feeling super secure, right? You're not attacking with your main attacker. So being able to paralyze and stall for that one turn could be that one turn that you need to get the Omastar out. Okay, and then you also play this very sad Omanyte. I love this Omanyte. So 70 HP, water type, single retreat, keeps that weakness to lightning. So the Poke Body on this guy is called Ancient Tentacles. So damage done to your opponent's Pokemon by your Omanyte, Omastar, Kabuto, Kabutops, or Kabutops EX is not affected by resistance. So that is also really good. Being able to hit through resistance, like I was saying, Pidgeot can be a bit of an issue. But this is one of those 2 answers, Kabutops. And then you can also just have this Omanyte out, and then all of a sudden you're not worried about resistance against whatever you play. Or, you know, some things are resistant to Psychic as well. So being able to not worry about your weakness or your opponent's resistance just means that that's one less concern for you to think about, so you can just try to figure out the rest of this deck strategy. So Rising Lunge for a water and a colorless. Flip a coin if heads, this attack does 20 damage plus 20 more damage. Whatever. So Omastar, this is the sweet Pokemon, such a cool Pokemon that you play in the Omastar line. So it's Delta species, so it's a Psychic type, which is super cool. And it's got 110 HP as well, which, like the Kabutops, not the Lightning type one, but the Legend Maker one. I think it's Legend Maker. Yeah, Legend Maker. The Legend Maker one, you know, 110 HP is pretty beefy. It's not too bad at all. 2 retreat, a lightning type weakness, retains that weakness. So bind for a Psychic and a colorless. Flip a coin if heads, the defending Pokemon is now paralyzed. This can be really clutch to set up for a 2-shot, because you bind into paralyzed, they can't do anything, and then you just one-shot them with the Vengeful Spikes. So this is your late game attacker. Kabutops is your early game attacker that you play 3 of, and then this Omastar that you play 3 of is your late game attacker. Really solid late game attacker. You can swing for 90 consistently with Vengeful Spikes once you get to the later part of the game. So Vengeful Spikes for 1 Psychic and 2 colorless, it does 30 plus 10 more damage for each Omanyte, Omastar, Kabuto, Kabutops, and Kabutops EX in your discard pile. You can't add more than 60 damage in this way, but I mean the attack caps at 90 damage, which is pretty solid for 3, and just being able to consistently hit for that every single turn as soon as you're late into the game is really solid, because your Kabutops are dead, and you play some cards as well in this deck that let you discard cards. Like you play TV Reporter, which not only helps you discard the energy off the Kabutops, but also lets you discard the Pokemon for Vengeful Spikes later in the game. So really cool attacker, really solid attack there. And you also play this Omastar. Blessings be to the Mitsuhiro Arata art. I always call out Mitsuhiro Arata. This Kabutops is also Mitsuhiro Arata, so shout outs to him. Really amazing artist, such a good artist. But this Omastar, I just can't get over that art. It's so good. So 100 HP, water type, single retreat, and a weakness to lightning. Poke Body, Ancient Fang. So as long as you have Kabuto, Kabutops, or Kabutops EX in play, Omastar's attacks do 20 more damage to the defending Pokemon. So this is definitely a really decent attack. It makes Dragoff a potential really big threat against Arcanine. So Dragoff for 1, you do 10 damage, but before doing damage, you can choose one of your opponent's bench Pokemon and switch it with their active Pokemon. So let's say you're up against an Arcanine EX, and they have an Arcanine on the bench with nothing on it, and an Arcanine in the active with 2. If you got this guy out and you have a Kabutops EX or a Kabuto on your bench, or Kabutops EX, Kabutops or a Kabuto, you don't play Kabutops EX because it's awful. I wish you did. I'll put it on the screen because it's really bad. You don't play it. But yeah, Ancient Fang with Dragoff lets you hit for 30 times 2 on an Arcanine lets you hit for 60. So if they got an empty Arcanine, you just get to bring it up, hit it for 60, and then they don't really have any good options there unless they have a Warp Point in their hand, because they got a Arcanine that's about to get 2-shot with Dragoff again. Even if they retreat it, right? Like even if they have that Warp Point, it doesn't really matter because you can just drag it off again and then take that easy 2 prizes. So that's really cool. Being able to drag off stuff later in the game as well. Like you don't hit for a ton of damage early game. Like Energy Stream is decent chip, but if your opponent is playing well, they'll switch those attackers to the bench and avoid you taking prizes if they can. But drag off kind of is your answer to that. You're just able to say, hey, listen, you got something on the bench that's got 30 HP. I don't really care. I'm just going to kill it instead of worrying about just having that be on the bench and not have a prize taken. So Hydro Splash is also kind of cool. Like I said, you're playing Scramble in this deck, so you can utilize this in a single attachment. And with Ancient Fang, you one-shot a Arcanine if it's activated. So Hydro Splash for 1 water and 2 colorless, it does 50. And then, with that Ancient Fang, you do 70, which is 140, which kills that Arcanine. So Hitting that water type, that is one of the main reasons that you play this Omastar, because Arcanine is such a good card, and there are some other good fire types in the format as well, so being able to counter that with a water type is a really solid option that this deck has. So these are both tech energy, so Holon's Magneton and Holon's Electrode. So they're technically energy cards because you don't play the Voltorb, you don't play the Magnemite, so you can't evolve them. The only thing that they'll ever do is be an energy card, and they work like this. So let's say you have a Kabuto in play, and you already have an energy on that Kabuto. If you have a Holon's Electrode or Holon's Magneton in your hand, what you can do is switch the energy that you have attached with the energy in hand, with the Holon's Electrode that you have in your hand, and then the energy goes back to your hand, and then all of a sudden Holon's Electrode or Holon's Magneton are worth 2 rainbow energy. So that's really clutch because you do play a lot of different types of attacks, like lightning, fighting. The requirements for some of these attacks are really different, and you don't play all those different types of energy. So with this, you do play Professor Elm's training method, so you can just search for these pretty consistently, and it just makes your attackers a little bit more consistent because you can find those rainbow energy, and you don't have to worry about, well, I don't have a double rainbow, or don't have a scramble in my hand, and I can't search it. With this, you do have some searchable outs in your deck that keep your energy a little bit more consistent there. Okay, so getting into some of the trainer cards, starting off with 4 Cessation Crystal. Cess is such a good card. This card is probably the most busted card in this format. I think this card is really, really, really good. You know, it could be, there's some other cards that could be argued best card in the format, but I think this card is very, very impressive and very powerful. So attach Cessation Crystal to one of your Pokemon, excluding Pokemon EX, that doesn't already have a Pokemon tool attached to it. And then as long as Cessation Crystal is attached to your active Pokemon, each player's Pokemon, both yours and your opponents, can't use Poke Powers or Poke Bodies. So like I said, there are some Poke Bodies in this deck that are really good, like Ancient Tentacle, or what's the one on the Kabuto called? Ancient Shell and Ancient Fang, rather, are both really situationally good. But like I said, there are some decks that your bodies are decent, but their powers or bodies are just way, way more powerful than yours. And it's much more beneficial to you to shut them off than to like shut everything off. And even though you don't get the benefit, like for example, Blastoise, you get to shut Blastoise off. This is a really, really important card in that matchup, and I don't think you can win without it. But yeah, so you kind of have to use discretion there when you want to attach a Cessation Crystal, because like I said, in some matchups, like against Bombtar, having this Kabutops with the body is better than having the Cessation Crystal. You know, in the early game, a Cessation Crystal might be better because they have to, like, you pop a Cessation Crystal and then they windstorm it, and then use Electrode, and at that point you just don't attach another one. So that's a little Bombtar tech trick there for you. So attach it first to shut off the Electrode, and then once they windstorm it, you don't attach another one, because the Kabutops Poke Body is so good, really, really powerful. And like I said, it really depends on what matchup, but some matchups you really, really need it, and it's really more beneficial than your Poke Bodies are in this deck. Okay, so you also play 1 Pokemon Retriever. So Pokemon Retriever is just to keep your Pokemon a little bit more consistent. You're able to get either 1 Pokemon back and put it in your hand, or shuffle 3 from your discard pile into your deck. So you kind of be careful about the shuffling 3 back, because Vengeful Spikes, that contradicts what you're trying to do with Vengeful Spikes, and it hurts your late game damage a little bit. So just be careful with that. But being able to retrieve a Pokemon like your tech attackers, like Tech Kabutops or Tech Omastar, like if you're versus an Arcanine, you're probably going to have to retrieve the Omastar because they're going to want to kill it right away. And if they end up killing it, being able to retrieve it can just mean the difference between, you know, struggling a little bit and just being able to hit an Arcanine for ×2 weakness, which is really, really powerful. Okay, so this is the main stadium of the deck. So Strange Cave, really, really cool card. It's pretty much the card that makes this deck work. So it's a stadium card. Once during your turn, each player's turn, that player may put an Omanyte, Kabuto, Aerodactyl EX, Lileep, or Anorith onto his bench from his or her hand. Treat the new bench Pokemon as a basic Pokemon. So with Team Assembly, this is the card that you're looking for with Jirachi, and you play other cards that let you search this card, but as soon as you find Strange Cave, you're rolling as soon as you have an attacker. So because these Pokemon are stage 1s, you get to search for them with Professor Elm's training method. So if you have Strange Cave and a Professor Elm's training method, you can just get a Kabuto or a Omanyte, kind of depends. Usually it's going to be Kabuto early because Kabutops is your early game attacker. It's a lot more energy efficient and just better in the early game, but it is dependent. Like if you're playing against something that's Psychic weak, you might want to hit that Omanyte first. But yeah, you just drop it, attach an energy to either this Kabuto or this Omanyte, and then you can just find a switch and then team assembly, and boom, you're playing the game and you got a full board of fossils. So really, really cool synergy with that card and team assembly. That's pretty much the only reason this deck works. Fossils are usually hot garbage, but because of Strange Cave and team assembly, this deck can actually get by a little bit. You know, I haven't tested it a ton, and I will say, like for Alligator, it's probably not going to be the tier 1 or tier S deck in this format, but it is a really cool deck that can hold it up with the best of them. That's kind of a cool part about RS to PK is even decks like this that aren't as powerful as like Bombtar still have the opportunity to potentially beat Bombtar. And you also play one Cursed Stone. So there's a little bit of a difference between the list that the dude on Twitter, I forget his name, I'll link it in the description below, but there's a couple differences on his list to this list. One of them is the Electrode. It literally does not matter. He played another Magneton. I just like it like this so that when I'm prize checking, I can be like, oh, I have my Electrode or my Magneton, and I don't have to worry about, you know, just the numbers game. It just makes it a little bit easier when I'm prize checking. But yeah, Cursed Stone, he played a second Cursed Stone as well, which I think is also pretty decent. It's not bad being able to play a 6 stadium. I think the meta for Stadium Wars in this format is kind of coming down to 5. 4 is too low now. I don't think you ever win a Stadium War with 4. People play the 5th stadium just so they can bump with another stadium and then win with the stadium that they want to win with. So Cursed Stone, I mean, 5 is pretty good. It's kind of what the meta is right now, but if you wanted to play a 6th just so you win that, especially with Scott, Scott is such a good supporter when you play really good stadiums. Really solid option, and I think maybe a second Cursed Stone could be good, but I did cut it for some other cards, and I'll explain the reasoning for that in a little bit when we get to those cards. So Cursed Stone, at any time in between turns, each player puts 1 damage counter on his or her Pokemon that has a Poke Power. So the only Pokemon you have that has Poke Power is Jirachi. So usually that dies. You usually just like set up your board until that dies. You don't want to like switch into it. It's kind of a waste of a bench slot. So yeah, as soon as it dies, then you can just play a Cursed Stone, and then you have no Pokemon with power. So that's really clutch on your side, and it can be really oppressive against some other decks that play a lot of powers. Okay. So speaking of Scott, so Scott is a really busted card in this deck. So good. It lets you find Strange Cave. So Scott says search your deck for up to 3 cards in any combination of supporter cards, stadium cards, and then you show them to your opponent and you put them in your hand, shuffle your deck afterwards. So finding that Strange Cave, like I said, as soon as you're able to find a Team Assembly, a Kabuto, or a Team Assembly Omanyte, and then get it into the active, you can just set up your board entirely. So Strange Cave is a big part of that. There are no other ways to get out fossils in this deck. You don't play any mysterious fossil, you don't play any other ways other than Strange Cave. So this is super important to be able to find this on your turn 1, and that's why you play the Jirachi and you play the 4 Scott and you play this 4 Strange Cave, just because you want to max your odds of finding that stadium turn 1. And this is one of the tech differences in the list, not a tech rather, but a line difference that I cut the Cursed Stone for. So you're playing 4 Rockets admin. The dude who posted this list originally only had 3. You know, I think you could argue that this admin could be a Cursed Stone, but the reason that I like it a little bit better as admin is because the deck is a little bit sketchy with only 1 basic. Like, I'm assuming that my opponent is going to get to mulligan a lot of times. So let's say I get to go first. Really clutch. I don't get to play a supporter card. But if I'm going second, right, and I don't have a Scott and I don't have a Strange Cave, my next best bet to find a Strange Cave is to shuffle draw 6. So that's one of the reasons is the early game draw is really good to help you find Strange Cave. But also your opponent is likely to be taking a lot of mulligans when you play this deck against them, just because you only play Jirachi. So it's very likely that they are taking a couple mulligans, and you know, sometimes those mulligans happen to be evolution Pokemon. So let's say you go first to go with Jirachi. They can't evolve yet because they haven't had their Pokemon in play for a turn. You know, Wishing Star, go to them. You have an admin in your hand. You find an admin off that. They play some cards, probably a lot of cards that they can, but not all of them. And they still have a pretty big hand because let's say, like, you can mulligan like up to almost an infinite amount of times. Like you can It's not totally illogical to be mulliganing like 5 or 6 times with this deck just because they'll only play one basic. So if they have like evolution cards in their hand and they're able to use that next turn, if you don't have a Scott to guarantee the Strange Cave, then Rockets Admin is your next best bet as well. So I think in addition with the one basic, I think 4 Rockets Admin just makes a lot of sense. Usually you go down on prices as well in this deck before you start coming back. So 4 Admin just kind of makes sense. It's such a good card too. Let's play 3 TV Reporter. So this card has a lot of synergy with this deck, not only because, well, I'll just read it first. So draw 3 cards and then discard any 1 card from your hand. So one of the reasons this card has a lot of synergy is because of this Kabutops. So I think it's called Energy Stream. Yeah, Energy Stream. Just lets you discard. You can discard a basic energy and then accelerate it to the Kabutops, so that's really clutch. But also it helps you discard Pokemon for Omastar if you want to be hitting for some Psychic weakness. So a little bit of synergy with both of your main attackers there, so that's why I play 3 TV Reporter. Decent draw, but the discarding is actually really beneficial in this deck. This will play 3 Professor Elm's Training Method. So like I said, you have to find the Kabuto or the Omanyte. And if you don't have that and you have the Strange Cave, this is one of the cards that lets you fulfill that combo that you need to hit. So if you hit a Strange Cave, but you don't have a Kabuto or Omanyte, but you do have an Elm's Training Method, because they're both stage 1 Pokemon, they're not technically basics, because the Fossil is a basic. You're just able to search them with a Professor Elm's Training Method, bench it, attach an energy, and then once your Jirachi goes down, you can just team assembly and set your board up. Also, clutch part of Professor Elm's Training Method, obviously setting up your evolution Pokemon like your Omastars and your Kabutops, but it lets you keep your energy a little bit more consistent, because like I said, with Magneton and Electrode, you can just search those out with Professor Elm's Training Method and then have that energy. Not only are you getting the energy attached for turn, but you're setting up the energy attached for next turn because of the energy that you're getting back into your hand. So I'll play 2 Copycat. So Copycat, this is one of the cards in the deck that I think might be able to get cut down to a 1 of, maybe for something else, kind of depends. Maybe second Cursed Stone for the Copycat might be okay, since we're playing 4 Rockets Admin. So maybe, maybe this, I think that might be okay, especially with Scott, right? Like Scott just lets you search stadiums, so when you win the stadium war, you want to win with Strange Cave. But as soon as you get all your Pokemon set up and you get a team assembly off, you don't really care about Strange Cave anymore. It's cool to bump your opponent's stadium because they like to have it in play usually. But Cursed Stone can do damage, which is a lot better. So maybe cut that 1 Copycat for Cursed Stone. But yeah, Copycat, shuffle your hand to your deck and then count the number of cards in your opponent's hand and draw that many cards. So another just draw consistency card that helps you keep consistent. Hands do tend to get a little bit large in this format sometimes, so that card could be good. But I think it could be cut down to a 1 of maybe. I'll play 2 Steven's Advice. So Steven's Advice is a really solid supporter card in this format. Draw a number of cards up to the number of your opponent's Pokemon in play. So if your opponent has a full board, you just get to straight draw 6, which is really clutch. If you do have more than 7 cards in your hand, including this one, you can't play this card. But if you keep in relatively decent control of your hand size, this shouldn't really be an issue. This is another one of the list changes. So the list was actually playing originally 2 Versus Seeker, and that's actually what I cut. So I actually didn't cut the Cursed Stone for the admin. I cut a Versus Seeker for the admin and a Versus Seeker for the next card, the Castaway that I'm about to show you. But we're gonna go over Briney's first. I cut the Cursed Stone for the Briney's. So maybe Copycat, I think with the 4th Rockets Admin, it keeps you a little bit more consistent, so you're not so worried about shuffle drawing with 4 admin. So maybe cutting that 1 Copycat for a Cursed Stone, I think could be really good. I'm gonna test that out a little bit more and we'll see where that goes. But yeah, Mr. Briney's Compassion, really good. Originally played 1 in the deck list and 2 Versus Seekers, but I think 2 is just better just because with Scott, Versus Seekers, you can't search it out. And sure, in the late game, it's really good, but in the early game, it's kind of dead. And healing is really, really solid in this deck. Like I said, with Kabutops, Ancient Shell, it just protects you for a long time. And 110 HP, you can have a lot more HP than 110 with Ancient Shell. Like if your opponent's hitting you for 40, it's down to 20, and then you're getting like 6 shot. So imagine your opponent hitting you like 5 times, and then you're almost dead. You got like 10 HP left, and you're just like Mr. Briney's Compassion. Like that is devastating for your opponent. And you can set that up really consistently with a Scott, right? So that's why I think maybe the raw supporters are better than the Versus versus secrets just because you do have the ability to search them with Scott. But yeah, Mr. Briney's Compassion, choose one of your Pokemon in play, excluding Pokemon EX, return that Pokemon and all cards attached to it to your hand. So not only is this good for healing, but also you can do some tricky plays with this and TV Reporter. Like if you want to buff your damage with Omastar, you can Mr. Briney's Compassion, take a Kabutops, and then if you want to get to the point where you're just swinging with an Omastar for big damage, for big 90s instead of a 30 or a 50 with Kabutops, you can discard the Kabutops with a TV Reporter next turn. Scott is really cool because it lets you grab 3 supporter cards if you want. So you can get like a Briney's, a TV Reporter, and a Stadium. And then you can set that play up if you want to. So a really cool card there and a really clutch card in terms of healing as well. Oh, and Mr. Briney's Compassion, this is another reason that you play too, is because hitting a early team assembly is good. And like I said, you don't really want to have Jirachi out once you have your Strange Cave. So being able to pick up Jirachi is another really cool part of Mr. Briney's Compassion that Mr. Briney's Compassion can do. So this is another one of the cards that's not in the original list, but I really like. There's so many freaking supporter cards in this deck, which I guess makes sense with Scott. But so Castaway is a one of that I think is really good in this deck, just because you do play those Cessation Crystals, so being able to search for them is really good. Castaway says search your deck for a supporter card, a Pokemon tool card, and a basic energy card. Show them to your opponent and put them in your hand. Shuffle your deck afterward. This card is also kind of a soft Strange Cave out. It can't get Strange Cave the same turn, but you can guarantee it the next turn if you don't get hand disrupted, because you can just find a Scott and then Scott can find you Strange Cave next turn. So this is kind of a soft out to that, just upping your consistency a little bit. But being able to find a basic energy can also be really important. You only play 5 in the deck, so being able to search it out so you can discard it and then get it back with Energy Stream and finding tools. I mean, this card is just really good, so it makes a lot of sense as a one of. Okay, so getting into the energy cards, you're going to be playing 4 basic fighting energy, so it makes a lot of sense. You know, Kabutops is your main attacker, especially in the early game. You just want to find the fighting energy and just start smoking for damage, and then you also play 1 basic psychic, just to be able to attack with that Omastar. And you know, if you have a Castaway, you can just search for that psychic. But with double Rainbow Energy and Scramble, so double Rainbow Energy for 2 Rainbow Energy, if it's on an evolution Pokemon, it's worth 2 Rainbow Energy, but your damage is reduced by 10, so that's kind of the drawback. But you know, with double Rainbow, kind of decent. It lets you attack with your big attacks, Vengeful Spikes, and I think it's like Sharp Claws, extra Claws, for lots of damage really fast, because you can just go regular energy attach, double Rainbow. Now I'm swinging in 2 turns instead of 3. So clutch thing that you can do with double Rainbow Energy. Even more clutch is Scramble. So Scramble Energy it's 1 colorless if you're tied on prizes or up on prizes. However, if you're down on prizes, this card is worth 3 Rainbow Energy. So you can fulfill extra Claws or Vengeful Spikes for a single attach, or that Kabutops Delta attack. I don't remember what it is. Thunderous Blow, or the attack on Omastar, Hydro Splash. So any of your big attacks, like if your opponent knocks out your Jirachi and you have an Omanyte and a Kabuto in play and an Elms Training Method, you search for it with a Scott last turn, you can just go boom, Elms Training Method, Scramble on this Omastar, and I have a Kabutops in play, so I'm just going to swing at your Arcanine for a big knockout, because Arcanine just one-shots your Jirachi if they hit it on turn 2, and they'll usually take that knockout if they have an opportunity. So being able to just return swing at them and just be like, I'm going to knock out everything that you have your energy invested to, and then still be able to attach a double Rainbow and keep attacking with whatever I'm attacking with this turn is really cool. Just Scramble Energy keeps your attackers really consistent in this deck, and it keeps you attacking with the type that you want to be attacking with at all times. Okay, well, this has been Fossils from RS to PK. If you have any questions about the deck list, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to get to them. If you made it this far, give her a like and a sub. Your boy would really appreciate it. I'm trying to get to 500 subs right now. We're going to do a giveaway and maybe a face reveal even at 500 subs. So throw that sub. I really appreciate it. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will see you next time.